The war room was cold, and the silence made it feel even colder. Captain Jack Morrison stood at the large window, staring out into the darkness of space. Behind him, dozens of military officers sat around a long table, their faces lit by the glow of computer screens. Nobody spoke. Nobody wanted to be the first to say what everyone was thinking. Earth was next. The Dominion had been moving through the galaxy for almost 300 years, and they had never lost, not once. 47 different civilizations had fallen to them, and each time it happened the same way. First, all communication from the target world would stop. Then, within a day or two, the leaders would appear on every screen across the galaxy and announce their surrender. No fighting, no war, just submission. Lisa Grant, the commander of the defense station called Sentinel-9, walked up beside Jack. She held a datapad in her hands, but she wasn't looking at it. Her eyes were fixed on the same empty space that Jack was watching. "The Kepler colonies went dark 3 hours ago," she said quietly. 8 billion people. Just gone quiet. Jack nodded slowly. He had been expecting this news, but hearing it still felt like a punch to the stomach. The Kepler colonies were only 3 star systems away from Earth. If the pattern held, the Dominion would reach Earth in 6 months. Maybe less. How do they do it? Lisa asked. How do they make entire civilizations surrender without firing a single shot? Before Jack could answer, the door to the war room opened. Dr. Ben Carter walked in, carrying a thick folder full of papers and looking like he hadn't slept in days. Ben was Earth's top expert on alien psychology, and for the past 6 months, he had been studying everything they knew about the Dominion. "I think I figured it out," Ben said, dropping the folder onto the table with a heavy thud. All the officers turned to look at him. The Dominion doesn't use normal weapons. They use something much worse. They use fear. Admiral Kate Sullivan, the head of Earth's entire defense fleet, stood up from her seat. She was a tall woman with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "We already know they use psychological warfare, Doctor. Tell us something we don't know." Ben opened his folder and pulled out several documents. "It's not just psychological warfare. It's biological. The Dominion has found a way to hack into the brain itself. They send out a broadcast signal that triggers specific neural pathways, the parts of the brain that control fear, obedience, and submission to authority. Every species they've conquered had brains that worked in similar ways." "Can we stop it?" Jack asked. Ben shook his head. "Not with technology. The signal is too sophisticated. By the time we detect it, it's already inside people's heads. But here's the thing. I don't think it will work the same way on humans." "I'm on." "Active." The room erupted in questions. Admiral Kate raised her hand for silence. "Explain." "Doctor." Ben pulled up a holographic image showing the human brain next to the brains of other species. "Look at this. Every species the Dominion conquered had one thing in common. They were all social species with strong hierarchical structures. Their brains are wired to follow leaders, to submit to authority, to find safety in unity. The Dominion's signal exploits that wiring. Humans are social too," Kate pointed out. "We have hierarchies. We have leaders." "Yes, but we're different," Ben insisted. "Humans are social, but we're also rebels. Our entire history is filled with people refusing to obey, questioning authority, and breaking rules. We form groups, yes, but we also break away from groups. We follow leaders, but we also overthrow them. Our brains are wired for both cooperation and defiance. That's unique in the galaxy." Lisa crossed her arms. "So you're saying the Dominion's weapon might not work on us because we're too stubborn?" "Exactly," Ben said. "But I'm not saying it won't affect us at all. It will still try to work. People will feel the pressure to submit, but I think humans have a better chance of resisting than any other species they've faced." Admiral Kate didn't look convinced. "That's a nice theory, Doctor. But theories don't win wars. What happens if you're wrong? What happens if that signal hits Earth and everyone just gives up? Then we lose, Ben said simply. But if I'm right, we might be the first species to actually fight back. Far away, on the edge of the solar system, a Dominion ship hung in the darkness. It was sleek and black, almost invisible against the stars. Inside, Prelate Zarn sat in his command chair, reviewing the data his crew had gathered about Earth. Zarn had conquered 12 worlds personally. He knew the process by heart. Study the target species. Identify their psychological weaknesses. Calibrate the compliance broadcast. Wait for surrender. It was simple, efficient, and it always worked. His second officer, Krell, approached with a data pad. Prelate, we have completed the analysis of Earth. The humans show standard markers for compliance susceptibility. Fear response is within normal range. Social hierarchy is present. Authority structures are established. They will break like all the others. Zarn nodded. Prepare the compliance broadcast. I want this world added to the Dominion within one rotation of their planet. Yes, Prelate. As Krell walked away, Zarn allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. 47 worlds had fallen to him and his fellow prelates. Earth would be 48. The humans would see the broadcast, feel the overwhelming pressure to submit, and they would give up. They always did. Every intelligent species in the galaxy understood that resistance was futile when your own mind betrayed you. What Zarn didn't understand, what he couldn't understand, was that humans had spent thousands of years dealing with their minds, betraying them. They knew about fear, about pressure, about the weight of authority, and they had developed something that no other species had. Spite. Back on Earth, Jack Morrison stood alone on the observation deck of Sentinel-9 after the meeting ended. He watched the stars and thought about what was coming. In 6 months, maybe less, the Dominion would arrive. They would send their signal. And then, humanity would find out if Ben's theory was right. Jack had served in the military for 20 years. He had fought pirates, stopped rebellions, and defended colonies from raiders. But he had never faced an enemy like this. An enemy that didn't want to kill you. An enemy that wanted to make you want to surrender. His communication device buzzed. It was a message from his daughter, Claire, who was living on Earth's surface. She was 17 years old and had no idea how much danger the planet was in. The government had kept the Dominion threat classified, not wanting to cause panic. "Hi, Dad," her message said. "Hope you're doing okay up there. Love you." Jack closed his eyes. Claire was why he did this job. She was why any of them did it. They had families, homes, lives, worth protecting. And if the Dominion thought humans would just roll over and give up all of that because of some signal in their heads, they were about to learn something important about humanity. The broadcast hit Earth at exactly 6 in the morning. Greenwich Mean Time. One moment, everything was normal. The next moment, every screen on the planet, every phone, every computer, every television, every digital billboard, showed the same thing. Colors swirled in hypnotic patterns. Sounds hummed at frequencies that seemed to vibrate inside people's skulls. And underneath it all, a message that didn't use words but somehow communicated directly to the deepest parts of the brain. Surrender, submit, obey. Resistance is pain. Compliance is peace. In New York City, people walking to work stopped in the middle of the street, staring at their phones. In Tokyo, students sat frozen at their desks. In London, drivers pulled over and simply stared at their dashboards. All across the planet, humanity felt the weight of the Dominion's will pressing down on their minds. On Sentinel-9, Jack Morrison felt it too. He was in the command center when every screen suddenly changed. The swirling patterns filled his vision, and he felt something shift inside his head. His hands moved without his permission. reaching toward the control panel where the surrender protocols were stored. Around him, his crew stood motionless, their eyes empty, their faces blank. This was it. This was how the Dominion won. They reached inside your mind and turned you into a puppet. Jack could feel the pressure building, telling him that fighting was useless, that surrender was the only logical choice, that resistance would only bring pain. But then, from somewhere deep in his mind, a voice spoke up. It was his own voice, and it said something simple. No. The pressure increased. The broadcast pushed harder. But that stubborn voice inside Jack's head refused to move. It was the same part of him that had gotten him in trouble as a child for not following rules. The same part that had made him question orders when they didn't make sense. The same part that had driven him to join the military not to follow commands, but to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. Down on Earth's surface, in a small radio station in Montana, something similar was happening to a man named Sam Hayes. Sam was a late-night radio host who played old rock music and talked about whatever was on his mind. He had been fired from 6 different stations over the years for refusing to stick to the program format. Sam liked to do things his own way. When the broadcast hit, Sam felt it immediately. The pressure, the command to submit, the overwhelming sense that resistance was futile. His hand reached for the power switch to shut down his station. But then he looked at the microphone in front of him, and something inside him snapped. Sam's hand moved away from the power switch and grabbed the microphone instead. His voice came out shaky at first, but it grew stronger with each word. "This is Radio Free Montana," he said. "If anybody out there can still hear me, if anybody's still fighting this thing in their head, I need you to listen. They're in our heads right now. They're telling us to give up. And you know what? That just makes me angry. Back to work, and well. Back to work. Back to work. Back to work." Sam's hands were shaking, but he kept talking. "My whole life, people have been telling me what to do. Teachers, bosses, cops, my ex-wife, everyone. Sit down, shut up, follow the rules, do what you're told. And I'm tired of it. I'm so tired of it. So here's what I'm going to say to these aliens who think they can just walk in and take over. No. That's it. Just no. I don't care what kind of technology you have. I don't care how many worlds you've conquered. You're not getting this one." The broadcast was weak. It only reached a few hundred miles around the station. But sometimes, that's all it takes to start something big. Amy Collins was a network engineer working in Denver. She had been fighting the Dominion broadcast in her own mind, trying desperately not to let it win. Then she heard Sam's voice coming through the emergency channels. His words, so human, so angry, so beautifully stubborn, gave her something to hold on to. It reminded her that she was more than just neurons and chemicals. She was a person, and people could choose. Amy's fingers flew across her keyboard. She accessed the emergency broadcast system, something she technically wasn't supposed to be able to do. And she amplified Sam's signal. Suddenly, his voice was reaching millions of people instead of thousands. "That's right," Sam continued, not knowing that his audience had just grown enormously. "You want us to surrender? You want us to bow down? Then you don't know humans very well. We're the species that looked at the impossible and said, 'Watch me.' We climbed mountains because they were there. We went to the moon because we could. We survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and everything else this universe threw at us. So here's my message to the Dominion. We're not interested in your empire. We're not interested in your rules. We're not interested in surrendering. Go find someone else to bully." On Sentinel-9, Jack Morrison heard Sam's broadcast through his communication implant. The words cut through the fog in his mind like a knife. He wasn't alone. Someone else was fighting. Someone else had found that stubborn core of defiance that made humans human. Jack's vision cleared. He looked around the command center and saw his crew starting to move again, blinking, shaking their heads, coming back to themselves. Lisa Grant was the first to fully recover. She looked at Jack with wide eyes. "What was that?" she asked. "That was the Dominion's weapon," Jack said. "And that's a radio host from Montana telling them it didn't work." Lisa managed a weak smile. "I like him already." All across Earth, the pattern repeated. People heard Sam's broadcast, and it gave them something to fight for. Not because Sam was a great leader or had some brilliant strategy, but because his message was so fundamentally, stubbornly human. He was angry at being told what to do, and that anger was contagious. A teenager in Seoul started broadcasting herself playing drums and screaming into a microphone. A teacher in Cairo read poetry about freedom. A mechanic in Sydney started telling jokes. None of it was coordinated. None of it was planned. But all of it was human, chaotic, individual, and impossible to control. Dr. Ben Carter, who had finally recovered from the initial shock of the broadcast, was monitoring everything from a research facility. His hands were shaking, but not from fear. He was excited. His theory had been right. Humans could resist the Dominion's signal, not because they were immune, but because they were too stubborn to let it win. "Keep broadcasting," he said into his communication device, sending the message to everyone he could reach. "Keep talking. Keep playing music. Keep doing anything that reminds you that you're human. Every voice is a crack in their system." Admiral Kate Sullivan had also recovered, though she looked 10 years older than she had an hour ago. She immediately started coordinating with military bases around the world. Everywhere she looked, soldiers and officers were coming back to themselves, shaking off the effects of the compliance broadcast. "All stations, report in," she commanded. One by one, the responses came. Some bases had been hit harder than others. Some people were still struggling to break free. But they were breaking free. That was what mattered. Humans were actually resisting a weapon that had never failed before. On the Dominion ship, Prelate Zarn stared at his displays in complete confusion. The compliance broadcast was working perfectly. The signal was strong. The psychological triggers were firing exactly as they should. But the humans weren't surrendering. Even more confusing, they were making noise. So much noise. Millions of individual broadcasts, each one different. Each one expressing defiance in a unique way. It wasn't a coordinated military response. It was chaos. Pure, unorganized, stubborn chaos. "This is not possible," Zarn said, his voice tight with frustration. "The compliance B." The Dominion broadcast grew stronger. Prelate Zarn had doubled the signal power, then tripled it, and finally pushed it to maximum intensity. The pressure on human minds became almost unbearable. People all over Earth fell to their knees, holding their heads, fighting an invisible enemy that was attacking them from the inside. But something unexpected was happening. The stronger the Dominion pushed, the harder humanity pushed back. It was like the aliens had accidentally triggered some deep survival instinct in humans. A refusal to be broken that grew stronger under pressure. Sam Hayes was still broadcasting from Montana. His voice was hoarse now, but he kept talking. "I can feel it getting stronger," he told his listeners. "It's like someone's squeezing my brain. But you know what? I've had migraines worse than this. I've had bosses yell at me for hours. I've sat through terrible meetings, and I survived all of that. So I can survive this too." His words were simple, almost silly compared to the advanced alien technology being used against Earth. But they worked. People listening found strength in Sam's stubbornness. If a random radio host could keep fighting, so could they. Captain Jack Morrison stood in the command center of Sentinel-9, gripping the edge of a console to stay upright. The increased signal strength was hitting everyone hard. Lisa Grant stood beside him, her face pale and sweating, but her jaw was set in determination. "Sir," she said through gritted teeth, If they keep increasing the power, I don't know how long we can hold out. Then we stop playing defense, Jack said. Dr. Carter, are you receiving this? Ben Carter's voice came through, weak but clear. I'm here, Captain. Barely. You said the Dominion species are built for order and unity, right? What happens if we expose them to pure chaos? There was a pause. Then Ben's voice came back, stronger now, excited. We've never tried that. But theoretically, it might disrupt them as much as their signal disrupts us. Their brains are wired for order. Chaos might be psychologically overwhelming for them. Then let's give them chaos, Jack said. I want every ship, every station, every satellite to start broadcasting. Not just defiance. Everything. Music, news, arguments, comedy shows, sports commentary, scientific debates, social media feeds, everything that makes humanity human. Let's see how they handle that. Quote, Admiral Kate Sullivan had been listening in. Despite the pain in her head from the Dominion signal, she smiled grimly. All stations. You heard, the captain. Open all broadcast channels. Show them what humanity really looks like. Within minutes, the plan was in motion. Earth's communication networks, which had been struggling to coordinate a defense, suddenly switched tactics. Instead of trying to block the Dominion signal, they started broadcasting outward with everything they had. The Dominion ship was suddenly hit with a tidal wave of human culture. News channels arguing about politics, music ranging from classical symphonies to heavy metal, literature from ancient philosophers and modern novelists, sports fans screaming about their favorite teams, scientists debating theories, artists explaining their work, comedians telling jokes, people arguing on social media about everything from the best pizza toppings to the meaning of life. It was chaos. Beautiful, messy, contradictory, passionate human chaos. On the Dominion ship, Krell was the first to show signs of distress. He stared at his screen, watching streams of human communication, trying to make sense of it. His mind, trained for order and clarity, couldn't process what he was seeing. Prelate, he said, his voice uncertain. The humans are contradicting themselves. They broadcast that cooperation is essential, and then immediately broadcast thousands of arguments. They claim to value peace while simultaneously celebrating warriors. They argue for logic while embracing emotion. They say one thing and do another. It's impossible to understand. Zarn felt it too. A creeping sense of disorder was spreading through his mind. The human broadcasts weren't following any pattern. There was no structure, no hierarchy, no clear message. It was like trying to drink from a fire hose of contradiction. They're trying to confuse us, Zarn said, but his voice lacked confidence. Maintain discipline. Focus on the mission. But it was getting harder. Every time Zarn tried to focus, another human broadcast would catch his attention. A song about freedom, followed by an argument about security. A speech about unity, followed by a celebration of individualism. Humans seemed to believe in everything and nothing at the same time. Lisa Grant was monitoring the Dominion communications from Sentinel-9. Captain, it's working. Their ship's communications are fragmenting. Different officers are giving conflicting orders. Some ships in their fleet are holding position. Others are advancing. And some are retreating. They're losing coordination. Jack allowed himself a moment of hope. We're using their own weapon against them. They tried to force us into order. We're showing them what happens when order meets chaos. Dr. Ben Carter was watching the same data from his research facility. This is fascinating, he said, almost forgetting the danger they were in. The Dominion built their entire civilization on unity and order. They've probably never encountered a species like us before. We cooperate and compete at the same time. We agree and disagree. We're walking contradictions, and we're fine with that. But to them, it must be like trying to solve an equation that has no answer. Sam Hayes, still broadcasting from Montana, had heard about the new strategy. So, We're fighting back by being ourselves? He said into his microphone. I like it. Hey, everyone listening. Just be human. Talk about whatever you want. Argue about stupid things. Sing off-key. Tell bad jokes. Be messy and complicated and impossible to understand. That's our weapon. All across Earth, people did exactly that. Not because they were ordered to, but because that's what humans did naturally. A grandmother in Boston started reading her favorite recipes on the air. A mechanic in Mumbai explained how engines worked while simultaneously arguing with his brother about cricket. A student in Buenos Aires played guitar and talked about her dreams. A father in Nairobi told his children stories about their ancestors. None of it was coordinated. None of it made sense as a military strategy. But all of it was authentically human. And that was exactly what the Dominion couldn't handle. On the Dominion flagship, Prelate Zarn sat in his command chair, trying to maintain control. But he could feel his certainty crumbling. For 300 years, the Dominion had conquered world after world with the same method. Until now, Prelate, Krell said, and Zarn noticed that his officer no longer sounded completely sure of himself. I recommend we withdraw and reassess. The humans are not responding as predicted. We do not withdraw, Zarn said automatically. But even as he said it, he wondered if that was true. The Dominion had never withdrawn before, but they had also never faced resistance like this before. Admiral Kate Sullivan watched the Dominion fleet on her tactical display. The ships were still in position, weapons still charged, but their movements had become erratic. Ships that should be maintaining formation were drifting. Communications between vessels were confused and contradictory. They're breaking, she said quietly. Not their ships, their coordination, their unity. They don't know how to function when everything isn't orderly. Jack Morrison nodded. And we're the opposite. Humans thrive in chaos. We've spent our entire history dealing with disorder, conflict, and contradiction. It's our natural state. Lisa Grant looked at the captain. So what do we do now? Do we press the advantage? Attack? While they're confused? Jack thought about it for a moment, then shook his head. No. We keep doing what we're doing. We keep being human. Let them figure out how to deal with us. It was a strange kind of warfare. No shots were being fired. No missiles were being launched. But a battle was definitely happening, and for the first time in the Dominion's long history, they weren't winning. 3 days after the Dominion broadcast first hit Earth, Prelate Zarn sat alone in his private quarters aboard the flagship. He stared at the wall, his mind struggling to process what was happening. The compliance broadcast was still running at maximum power. The human planet was surrounded by the full might of the Dominion fleet. By every measure, Earth should have surrendered, but it hadn't. Worse, the humans were doing something to his crew. The constant stream of human broadcasts, all that chaos and contradiction, was affecting Dominion officers in ways Zarn couldn't predict. Some were becoming hesitant, questioning orders before following them. Others were showing signs of independent thought, expressing personal opinions instead of echoing the collective will. Krell entered the quarters without announcing himself, something no proper Dominion officer would normally do. Zarn noticed this breach of protocol, but said nothing. That in itself was unusual. Prelate? We need to talk, Krell said. Another breach. Subordinates didn't demand conversations with their superiors. Speak, Zarn said, too tired to enforce proper discipline. I've been analyzing the human broadcasts, Krell said. And I think I understand why we're failing. We assumed the humans were divided because they argue and contradict each other. But that's not weakness. It's how they test ideas. They argue to find truth, not to establish dominance. And because no single authority controls them, there's no single point we can break. Zarn looked at his officer with growing concern. You sound like you admire them. Krell paused, and in that pause, Zarn saw something he had never seen in a Dominion officer before. Uncertainty. I'm not sure admiration is the right word, but I think I'm beginning to understand them. And understanding them makes it harder to want to conquer them. This was dangerous territory. The entire Dominion society was built on the principle that all other species should be brought under their control. Questioning that principle was heresy. But Zarn found he couldn't bring himself to punish Krell, because deep down, he was thinking the same things. On Earth, Dr. Ben Carter was coordinating with researchers around the world, studying the effects of humanity's counter-broadcast on the Dominion. The results were remarkable. The Dominion fleet wasn't retreating, but it wasn't advancing either. It was stuck, paralyzed by indecision. It's like they've never had to make a choice before, Ben explained to Admiral Kate Sullivan during a video conference. Their entire civilization is built on collective decision-making. Everyone agrees on what to do, because their psychology makes disagreement uncomfortable. But now they're being exposed to a species that disagrees about everything, and it's breaking their ability to function. Kate listened carefully. She looked exhausted. They all did. Fighting off the Dominion's compliance broadcast for 3 days straight had taken its toll on everyone, but they were still fighting. And that mattered. So what's our next move? Kate asked. We can't keep this up forever. Eventually, people are going to break from the strain. I have an idea, Ben said. We've shown them chaos. Now maybe we should show them choice. Explain. The Dominion operates on compliance. Everything in their society is about following the collective will. But humans understand something they don't. The difference between being forced to do something and choosing to do it. What if we offer them that choice? Kate frowned. You want to negotiate with them? After they tried to enslave our entire planet? Not negotiate. Teach. We show them that cooperation doesn't have to mean submission. That you can work together with someone without giving up your independence. Kate thought about it for a long moment. It was a risky strategy. But then again, everything they had done so far had been risky. And it had worked. All right, Doctor. Prepare your message. But make it clear that we're not surrendering. We're offering them a way out. Ben worked with a team of linguists and psychologists to craft a broadcast directed specifically at the Dominion fleet. It had to be clear and direct, but also show the kind of choice-based thinking that humans valued. Captain Jack Morrison reviewed the message before it was sent. To the Dominion forces, it began. You came here to make us surrender. We refused, not because we're stronger than you, but because we will not be controlled. But here's what we will do. We'll talk. We'll negotiate. We'll cooperate if you approach us as equals instead of subjects. That's the human way. We choose our alliances. We don't submit to them. If you can accept that, we can find a way forward. If you can't, then we'll keep fighting. The choice is yours. Think it'll work? Lisa Grant asked Jack, as they prepared to broadcast the message. No idea, Jack admitted. But it's worth trying. The alternative is fighting until one of us breaks, and I'm not sure which side that would be. The message was broadcast on all frequencies, aimed directly at the Dominion fleet. On the flagship, Zarn received it and called his senior officers together to discuss their response. They're offering terms, Krell said. That's never happened before. Every other species just surrendered. Because every other species was intelligent enough to recognize superior force, another officer said. But his voice lacked conviction. Is it superior force? Krell challenged. We have more ships, yes. More weapons. But they've resisted our compliance broadcast. They've turned our psychological warfare against us. They've shown us that our methods aren't absolute. Is that not a kind of strength? The meeting dissolved into argument, something that would have been unthinkable in Dominion culture just days ago. Officers who had always spoken with one voice were suddenly expressing different opinions, weighing options, considering alternatives. Zarn listened to it all and felt something crack inside him. For his entire life, he had known his purpose. He was part of the Dominion. He conquered worlds. He brought order to chaos. But what if chaos wasn't something to be conquered? What if it was just another way of existing? Finally, Zarn made a decision. It was his decision, not the collective's, and that terrified him. But it also felt strangely liberating. "Open a channel to Earth's leadership," he ordered. "We will talk." On Sentinel-9, Jack Morrison almost couldn't believe what he was hearing. "Say that again?" "The Dominion is requesting negotiations," the communications officer repeated. "Prelate Zarn wants to talk." Jack looked at Lisa, who looked just as shocked as he felt. "They're actually backing down." "Not backing down," Lisa corrected. "They're choosing." "That's different. And maybe more important, Admiral Kate Sullivan took the lead in the initial negotiations. They were held over secure channels, with representatives from multiple Earth governments participating. Prelate Zarn appeared on screen, and Kate was struck by how uncertain he looked. This was a being who had conquered worlds, but now he seemed lost. "This is unusual for us," Zarn began, and Kate noticed he said us, not the Dominion. A small but significant distinction. "We have never negotiated with a species we intended to conquer. We have never had to. Your resistance has forced us to reconsider our methods." "Good," Kate said bluntly. "Because your methods are wrong. You can't go around the galaxy forcing species to submit. That's not order. That's tyranny. We believed we were bringing stability," Zarn said. "Preventing conflict. Creating unity. At the cost of freedom," Kate replied. "Real unity has to be chosen, not forced. Real cooperation comes from mutual respect, not domination." The negotiations continued for hours, then days. The Dominion representatives kept trying to find the human authority figure, the one voice that spoke for everyone. But there wasn't one. They had to negotiate with military leaders, civilian governments, scientists, and even Sam Hayes, the radio host, who had become an unexpected symbol of human resistance. Sam's involvement in the negotiations was Kate's idea. "You started this," she told him. "You should be part of finishing it." Sam was uncomfortable with the attention, but he showed up to the negotiation sessions and spoke his mind. When Zarn complained about the inefficiency of having to deal with so many different human voices, Sam laughed. "Welcome to humanity," he said. "We don't do efficiency. We do chaos. But somehow, we make it work." Dr. Ben Carter watched the negotiations with fascination. The Dominion representatives were learning, slowly and uncomfortably, how to function in an environment where not everyone agreed. They were learning to debate, to compromise, to accept that multiple viewpoints could coexist. "We're not just defending Earth," Ben told Jack during one of their conversations. "We're teaching them a completely different way of thinking. We're showing them that order and chaos aren't opposites. They're just different points on a spectrum. And you need both for a healthy civilization." 6 weeks after the first Dominion broadcast, an agreement was reached. It wasn't a surrender from either side. It was something new in galactic history. A treaty between equals. The Dominion would withdraw from Earth's solar system. They would not attempt to conquer humanity. In exchange, Earth would share information about human psychology and culture, helping the Dominion understand different ways of organizing society. But the real changes were happening in ways that no treaty could capture. The Dominion ships that had surrounded Earth were different now. Officers who had once spoken with perfect unity were arguing about philosophy. Crew members were expressing personal preferences about their duties. Some Dominion individuals had even requested permission to stay on Earth, wanting to experience human society firsthand. Prelate Zarn stood in the conference room of Sentinel-9, meeting with Jack Morrison and Admiral Kate Sullivan one last time before the fleet departed. It was a strange gathering. A few months ago, these three had been enemies preparing for war. Now they were something else. Not quite friends, But not enemies either. Your species has changed us, Zarn admitted. I'm not sure the Dominion Council will approve of these changes. Then maybe it's time for the Council to change too, Kate said. You've spent 3 centuries conquering other species. Maybe it's time to try something different, like cooperating with them instead of controlling them. Zarn considered this. The idea would have been unthinkable 2 months ago. Now it seemed almost reasonable. That was how much exposure to humanity had altered his thinking. What will you do now? Jack asked. Return home and report your failure? I don't see this as a failure, Zarn said slowly, testing out this new way of thinking. We came here to add Earth to the Dominion. That didn't happen. But something else did. We learned that our way isn't the only way. That's valuable information, even if it's uncomfortable. Lisa Grant, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. What about the other worlds you've conquered? The 47 civilizations that submitted to your compliance broadcast? Zarn's expression became troubled. That is a more complex question. They surrendered willingly, according to our understanding of willingness. But now I wonder if that was true choice, or simply obedience enforced by biology. You should go back to them, Lisa said. Tell them what you learned here. Give them the same choice you're giving us. That would mean dismantling the Dominion, Zarn said. Everything we've built for centuries. Or transforming it, Kate suggested. Instead of an empire, maybe you could be an alliance. Species working together by choice, not by force. Zarn stood silent for a long moment. Then he did something no Dominion prelate had ever done before. He laughed. It was a strange sound, uncertain and unpracticed, but genuine. You humans are dangerous, he said. You make impossible ideas seem reasonable. As the Dominion fleet prepared to leave, something unexpected happened across Earth. People started broadcasting messages directly to the Dominion ships. Not threats or warnings, but something else entirely. Invitations. Come back sometime, one message said. Not as conquerors, as visitors. We'd like to show you more of what humanity is like. I run a restaurant in Florence. Another message read, if you ever want to try human food, you're welcome here. Fair warning. We're going to argue about the best way to make pasta. There's a philosophy conference next year in Berlin, someone else broadcast. We'd love to hear the Dominion perspective on consciousness and free will. Just be prepared for people to disagree with you. That's how we learn. Reader. Lux of 1. We have reader. R. We have a place. And reader. Sam Hayes, still broadcasting from Montana, summed it up in his typical style. Hey, Dominion fleet, thanks for not enslaving us. Sorry we broke your empire with stubbornness. If you're ever back in the neighborhood, stop by. We'll argue about music and politics and probably annoy you. But that's just how we show affection. Aboard the Dominion flagship, Krell was monitoring these broadcasts and shaking his head in amazement. They're inviting us back. After we tried to conquer them, they're inviting us back. That's humans for you, Zarn said. Illogical, contradictory, and somehow more sophisticated than species with 10 times their technology. They fight you fiercely, then offer friendship the moment you stop fighting. It makes no sense. Maybe that's why it works, Krell suggested. Dr. Ben Carter watched the Dominion fleet begin its departure from an observation station. He was exhausted but satisfied. His theory had been right. Humanity's chaotic, contradictory nature had been their greatest defense. But more than that, it had been a teaching tool. They hadn't just defeated the Dominion. They had changed them. What happens now? His assistant, a young researcher named Pete, asked, Do we just go back to normal? Nothing's going to be normal after this, Ben said. We've just proven to the galaxy that the Dominion's method isn't absolute. Every one of those 47 conquered worlds is going to hear about this. Some of them are going to start questioning their own submission. We might have just started a galactic revolution without meaning to. On Earth's surface, life was slowly returning to normal, or at least a new version of normal. The governments were still dealing with the aftermath of the crisis. Scientists were studying the technology and psychology of the Dominion. Military strategists were developing new defensive protocols. But ordinary people were doing what humans always did after a crisis. They were moving forward. Claire Morrison, Jack's daughter, sent him another message. This one was different from her usual cheerful notes. "Dad, I know something big happened up there. Mom said I'll understand when I'm older. But I wanted to say I'm proud of you. Whatever you did, I know you did it to protect us. Love you." Jack read the message 3 times, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. They had done it. Against impossible odds, using nothing but human stubbornness and the refusal to be controlled, they had protected Earth. They had protected Claire, and everyone like her. Admiral Kate Sullivan held a press conference to announce the end of the crisis. She stood at a podium, cameras from around the world focused on her, and she chose her words carefully. "The Dominion came here to conquer us," she said. "They had technology we couldn't match. They had a weapon we had never faced before. By every logical measure, we should have lost. But we didn't lose because humans don't operate on logic alone. We operate on choice, on freedom, on the fundamental belief that we control our own destiny. The Dominion learned that you can't conquer a species that refuses to be conquered, and in teaching them that lesson, we may have changed the galaxy." Sam Hayes listened to the Admiral's speech from his radio station in Montana. When it was over, he turned on his microphone and spoke to his listeners, many of whom had stayed with him through the entire crisis. "Well, folks, we did it. We told an alien empire to get lost, and they actually left. I'm not going to lie. I'm pretty proud of us right now. Not bad for a species that still argues about whether pineapple belongs on pizza. And speaking of which, it absolutely does not." "Fight me," some of his listeners laughed. Some sent messages agreeing. Some sent messages disagreeing. Some sent messages about completely different topics. It was chaotic and messy and perfectly human. On Sentinel-9, Jack Morrison stood at his usual spot by the observation window, watching the last of the Dominion ships disappear into the distance. Lisa Grant joined him. "Think they'll be back?" she asked. "Probably," Jack said. "But not as invaders. Maybe as allies. Maybe as friends. Or maybe they'll go home and forget about us entirely. Who knows?" "Who knows?" Lisa echoed. "That's very human of you, Captain. Comfortable with uncertainty." Jack smiled. "It's the human condition. We never know what's coming next. We just deal with it when it arrives." As the Dominion fleet left the solar system, Prelate Zarn recorded a final mess. 3 months after the Dominion fleet left Earth's solar system, the galaxy began to change in ways no one had predicted. The news of Earth's resistance spread quickly. 47 worlds that had surrendered to the Dominion started asking questions they had never asked before. If humans could resist, why couldn't they? The first world to break free was a planet called Veron, home to a species of winged people who had submitted to the Dominion 20 years earlier. Their leader, a woman named Syra, had heard about Earth's resistance through interstellar communication networks. She gathered her people and made an announcement that shocked the Dominion Council. "We were told that resistance was impossible," Syra said. "We were told that the compliance broadcast could not be fought. But Earth proved that was a lie. We submitted because we thought we had no choice. Now we know we did have a choice. We just didn't know it at the time. Today, Veran reclaims its independence. The Dominion sent ships to Veran, intending to reinforce their control. But something had changed. When the compliance broadcast was activated, the Veran people fought it. They didn't fight it as effectively as humans had. Their psychology was different. But they fought. And when millions of people fight together, even a small resistance can become powerful. The Dominion ships withdrew from Veron without firing a shot. It was easier to retreat than to admit they couldn't control a population that had decided to be free. On Earth, Dr. Ben Carter was monitoring these developments with intense interest. He had been contacted by representatives from multiple alien species, all wanting to understand how humans had resisted the Dominion. He found himself teaching xenopsychology to the galaxy. The key isn't in having human psychology, Ben explained during a conference call with scientists from a dozen different worlds. The key is understanding that submission is a choice. The Dominion's broadcast works by convincing you that you have no choice. But that's a lie. You always have a choice. It might be difficult. It might be painful. But it exists. Easy for humans to say, one alien scientist responded. Your species has a natural resistance to authority. Ours doesn't. Our evolution made us cooperative and obedient. Then teach your people that cooperation doesn't mean obedience, Ben replied. You can work together without giving up individual thought. That's what makes the difference between a healthy society and a controlled one. The conversation spread. Soon, species across the galaxy were discussing concepts that the Dominion had tried to suppress for centuries. Freedom, choice, individual rights, the difference between cooperation and submission. Captain Jack Morrison received a surprising message one day. It was from Prelate Zarn. The message was simple but significant. Captain Morrison, I thought you should know that the Dominion Council has decided to release all conquered worlds from compulsory compliance. It is not a complete dissolution of the Dominion, but it is a beginning. Species can now choose whether to remain associated with us or not. Many are choosing to leave. Others are choosing to stay, but under different terms. Your species taught us that unity without choice is tyranny. We are learning, slowly, to do better. Thank you. And if you are ever in our region of space, I would welcome a conversation, not as prelate to captain, but as one individual to another. Zarn. Jack showed the message to Lisa Grant, who read it with a smile. Looks like we didn't just save Earth. We changed the whole galaxy. I'm not sure we meant to, Jack said. The best revolutions are usually accidental, Lisa replied. Admiral Kate Sullivan was dealing with a different kind of change. Earth had become famous across the galaxy. They were receiving communications from hundreds of species. Some asking for advice. Some wanting to establish diplomatic relations. Some simply wanting to understand these strange humans who had done the impossible. We need to be careful, Kate warned during a meeting with Earth's government leaders. We've become a symbol. People are looking to us for guidance. But we're not teachers or leaders for the galaxy. We're just one species, trying to figure things out like everyone else. Then maybe that's what we tell them, suggested the Prime Minister of the European Union. That we don't have all the answers. That we're just as confused and messy as anyone else. That might be the most valuable lesson we can offer. Sam Hayes was still broadcasting from Montana, though his show had changed significantly. He now had listeners on 40 different worlds, all tuning in to hear a human perspective on everything from politics to music to the meaning of life. I got a message today from someone on a planet I can't even pronounce, Sam told his audience one night. They asked me what the secret to freedom is, and I thought about it for a while. And you know what I realized? There is no secret. Freedom isn't a trick or a technique. It's just deciding, every single day, that you're going to think for yourself. That you're going to question what you're told. That you're not going to let anyone, not your government, not your neighbors, not some alien empire, tell you who you have to be. It's simple. But simple doesn't mean easy. Claire Morrison, Jack's daughter, had become fascinated by the events her father had been part of. She spent hours reading about the Dominion, about the different alien species, about the changes happening across the galaxy. When Jack came home on leave, she had questions ready. Dad, did you know you were going to change everything? She asked. Jack thought about it carefully. No. We were just trying to survive. We were trying to protect Earth. The rest just kind of happened. But you didn't give up, Claire said. Even when the broadcast was hitting you, even when it seemed impossible, you didn't give up. Why? Third, Jack looked at his daughter and saw the future of humanity looking back at him. Because giving up would have meant losing you. Losing your mother. Losing everyone I cared about. And that wasn't acceptable. So we fought, even when it seemed hopeless. That's very human, Claire said, using a phrase that had become common after the crisis. Yeah, Jack agreed. I guess it is. Dr. Ben Carter published a paper about the events that became required reading across the galaxy. He called it, The Power of Choice. How Humanity's Psychological Diversity Defeated Enforced Unity. In it, he argued that diversity, both genetic and cultural, was humanity's greatest strength. The Dominion tried to conquer us using a weapon that exploited uniformity, he wrote. But humans are not uniform. We are diverse in our thinking, our beliefs, our reactions, and our choices. This diversity meant there was no single psychological attack that could break all of us at once. What worked on some people didn't work on others. What convinced some to submit made others angry enough to resist. The paper was translated into hundreds of languages and read by millions of beings across the galaxy. It became the foundation for a new understanding of psychology, culture, and freedom. On the Dominion homeworld, massive changes were taking place. The Council was in turmoil as individual Dominion citizens started expressing personal opinions for the first time in their history. Some wanted to maintain the old ways. Others wanted to embrace the changes that exposure to humanity had triggered. The debates were fierce and uncomfortable, but they were happening. That alone was revolutionary. Krell, who had served as Zarn's second officer, had become something of a celebrity among young Dominion citizens. He gave speeches about his experiences near Earth, about watching humans resist, about learning to think independently. It was terrifying at first, Krell told one audience. Making choices without the collective's input felt wrong. But then I realized something. The collective was never as unified as we pretended. We all had individual thoughts. We just suppressed them. The humans taught us that individual thoughts aren't dangerous. They're essential. A civilization that can't question itself, can't improve itself. Back on Earth, life continued. The crisis was fading into history, becoming something people told stories about. But the changes it had caused were permanent. Earth had gone from being an isolated planet to a key player in galactic affairs. They hadn't sought that role, but they had it anyway. Jack Morrison stood on Sentinel-9 for what he knew might be the last time. He was being transferred to a new position, heading up Earth's first diplomatic mission to other worlds. It wasn't a job he had asked for. But Kate Sullivan had insisted. You understand them, she had told him. You fought them, and then talked with them. You know how to deal with species that don't think like us. Lisa Grant was staying on Sentinel-9 as its new captain. She stood with Jack at the observation window, both of them looking out at Earth below. You know what I think about sometimes, Lisa said. What would have happened if Sam Hayes hadn't turned on that microphone? What if he had just given in to the broadcast, like everyone else? Someone else would have spoken up, Jack said with certainty. Maybe not as soon, maybe not from Montana, but someone would have. Because that's what humans do. When pushed, we push back. It's in our nature. Very human of you to say, Lisa said with a smile. Jack laughed. That phrase is going to follow us forever, isn't it? Probably. But there are worse things to be known for. Sam Hayes ended his broadcast that night with words that would be remembered for generations. When this whole thing started, I was just a radio host in the middle of nowhere. I wasn't trying to save the world. I was just angry at being told what to do. But that's the thing about humans. We don't need to be heroes to change things. We just need to be ourselves. Stubborn, messy, argumentative ourselves. So to everyone out there, On Earth, or on any other planet, remember this. You have a choice. You always have a choice. Sometimes, it's a hard choice. Sometimes, it's a scary choice. But it's yours. Don't let anyone take that away from you. This is Sam Hayes, signing off. Stay free, stay human, and keep arguing about the important stuff. Like whether pineapple belongs on pizza. Years later, historians would look back on this period as a turning point in galactic history. They would call it the breaking. When the Dominion's empire shattered, they would call it the awakening. When 47 worlds remembered they were free, they would call it the human moment. When one small species taught the galaxy a lesson about the nature of freedom. But to the people who lived through it, it was simpler than all that. It was the time when humanity looked at an empire that had never lost and said no. It was the time when stubbornness became a virtue and chaos became a weapon. It was the time when Earth proved that you don't need to be the strongest or the smartest or the most advanced to win. You just need to refuse to lose. The Dominion had come to Earth with a list of worlds to conquer. Earth was supposed to be number 48. Instead, Earth became the reason there would never be a 48th conquest. Not because humans were warriors or geniuses or blessed with superior technology, but because they were human, complicated, contradictory, chaotic, and absolutely impossible to control. And in the end, that made all the difference. The galaxy would never be the same again, and Earth, that small blue world that had been next on the list, had ensured that no one would ever have to be on that list again. Freedom, once remembered, was impossible to forget. And humanity had reminded the entire galaxy what freedom felt like. That was humanity's gift to the stars. Not technology, or weapons, or strategy, but the simple, stubborn insistence that everyone deserved to choose their own path. It was a very human thing to do, and it was exactly what the galaxy needed, age to send back to the Dominion Council. He knew this message would determine his fate. He might be praised for attempting to conquer Earth. He might be punished for failing. He might be exiled for allowing his crew to be influenced by human thinking. But Zarn found he didn't care as much about the Council's judgment as he once had. That was perhaps the most profound change humanity had caused in him. He now understood that following orders wasn't the same as doing what was right. To the Dominion Council, he began. I must report that Earth has not been added to the Dominion. The human species resisted our compliance, broadcast through methods we did not anticipate. But this report is not about failure. It is about discovery. We have encountered a species that organizes itself through chaos rather than order, through choice rather than compliance, through individual freedom rather than collective unity. And they thrive. This suggests that our understanding of civilization has been incomplete. I recommend we reconsider our approach to other species, not as subjects to be conquered, but as teachers from whom we might learn. This will be controversial. This may be rejected, but it is what I believe to be true, and believing something because it is true, rather than because the collective agrees with it, is a very human thing to do. I find I am comfortable with that. Zarn ended the recording and sent it. Whatever happened next would happen. He had made his choice. That was enough. Jack nodded. The question is, will they accept that lesson? Or will they go back to their old ways once they leave? I don't think they can go back, Ben said. We've changed them. Just by being ourselves, just by refusing to be controlled, we've introduced them to concepts they've never dealt with before. Individual choice. Personal responsibility. The freedom to disagree. Those ideas are contagious. Once you've experienced them, it's hard to go back to pure obedience. On the Dominion flagship, Zarn sat alone again, thinking about everything that had happened. His crew was different now. They questioned orders, expressed opinions, and sometimes even argued with each other. It was disturbing, and uncomfortable, and strange. But it was also, Zarn realized, alive. For the first time in his life, he felt like an individual, rather than just a part of a collective. And while that was frightening, it was also, somehow, right. On Earth, people were starting to understand what was happening. They weren't just defending their world. They were teaching the galaxy a lesson. They were showing everyone that order and control weren't the only way to build a civilization. That chaos and freedom could be just as strong, maybe stronger. Sam Hayes summed it up perfectly in one of his broadcasts. We're winning not because we're better or smarter or more advanced. We're winning because we're us. Messy, complicated, contradictory, and absolutely impossible to control. And that's beautiful. The Dominion had come to Earth expecting an easy victory. They had expected humans to be like every other species they had conquered, capable of being broken and controlled. But they had made a critical mistake. They had assumed that because humans could feel fear and pressure and the weight of authority, they would submit to it. They hadn't counted on humanity's greatest strength, the ability to feel all those things and still say no. Roadcast has never failed. Not once in 3 centuries. Krell, his second officer, looked equally confused. Prelate, I believe I understand the problem. The broadcast works by establishing a clear authority gradient. It makes the target species want to submit to a greater power. But the humans, they don't respond to authority the way other species do. What do you mean? Look at their communications, Krell said, pulling up samples of human broadcasts. Some are defying us out of loyalty to their nations. Others are resisting because of family bonds. Some are fighting because of abstract concepts like freedom or dignity. And there's one human here who's broadcasting defiance because, and I quote, "Nobody tells me what to do. Not my government, not my neighbors, and definitely not some space tyrants." Zarn felt something he had never felt before: doubt. "Increase the signal strength," he ordered. "Break them." But deep down, he was starting to wonder if breaking humanity was even possible. Humans didn't surrender easily. They didn't bow to threats. And they certainly didn't do what they were told just because someone expected them to. The Dominion had conquered 47 civilizations. But they had never met anyone like humanity before. They had never faced a species whose first instinct, when pushed, was to push back harder. Jack opened his eyes and looked back out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Dominion was coming, and humanity would be ready, not with better weapons or stronger shields, but with something much more powerful: the absolute refusal to give up.